The locks had been changed. That was the first thing I noticed when I slid my key into the front door of my own house at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, suitcase still in my hand, taxi already pulling out of the driveway. The key turned halfway and stopped. I stood there on my own porch, staring at the brass handle I'd installed myself 23 years ago, and I thought, no, I must be tired, it's early. Try again. I tried again. The key didn't fit. I set my suitcase down on the welcome mat, the one my wife Barbara had picked out, the one with the little yellow sunflowers on it, and I stood very still for a moment listening. The neighborhood was quiet. A sprinkler was running 2 houses down. Somewhere a dog barked once and went silent. I walked around to the back door. It opened. Later I would understand that they hadn't thought about the back door. They'd been sloppy. Overconfident. That was always my son-in-law's biggest flaw. He assumed everyone around him was less intelligent than he was, including me. Especially me. I was supposed to be in Phoenix for another 4 days. My college roommate's retirement party. The kind of thing you fly out for even when your knees ache and the middle seat on the plane feels like a medieval punishment device. I'd been looking forward to it for months, but there had been a water main break near the venue. The party got pushed to the weekend, and rather than sit alone in a hotel room eating overpriced room service, I booked the first flight home. Nobody knew I was coming back. I should have been relieved to be home. I should have dropped my suitcase in the bedroom, kissed Barbara on the forehead, and fallen asleep for 12 hours. Instead, I walked into my own kitchen and stood very still because something was wrong. It took me a second to understand what it was. The pill organizer. The blue one I'd bought at CVS and filled myself before I left. 7 days, every compartment labeled with a strip of masking tape and a marker. It was sitting on the counter where I always left it, but every single compartment was still full. I'd been gone 4 days. 4 compartments should have been empty. Barbara had not taken a single pill. I didn't run. My heart was doing something strange and fast behind my ribs, but I didn't run. I walked down the hallway toward the bedroom, and I pushed the door open slowly because some part of me was afraid of what I was going to find. She was there. She was breathing. She was lying on top of the covers in the same clothes she'd been wearing when I left. I recognized the pale blue cardigan, the one with the small pearl buttons, and the room smelled stale and closed in, the curtains drawn tight against the morning. Barbara. She opened her eyes. They took a moment to focus. Nate, she said. Her voice was so dry it cracked on the single syllable. I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. It was cold. Her lips were cracked at the corners, and her face had a grayish look that scared me more than anything I'd seen in 41 years of marriage. When did you last have something to drink? I said. She thought about it. Actually had to think about it. I'm not sure, she said. Yesterday, the day before. I went to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, brought it back. She drank it in slow sips while I sat beside her, and tried to keep my face calm and my hands steady and my mind from going to the place it was already going. Barbara has MS. She was diagnosed 11 years ago, and for most of that time she managed well. Some bad days, some very bad days, but she kept her independence, her sharp mind, her sense of humor. 2 years ago things changed. The progression got steeper. She needs help now, real help, with the things that most of us do without thinking. I knew that before I left for Phoenix. That's why I had made arrangements. My daughter Renee had called me 3 months earlier and suggested it herself. Dad, she said, I've been thinking. I work from home now. Victor's schedule is flexible. Why don't we move in with you and Mom, just temporarily, help out while you figure out the long-term plan? Victor is her husband. He sells commercial real estate. He has very white teeth and a firm handshake. And he has never, in the 12 years he's been married to my daughter, looked me directly in the eyes for more than a few seconds at a time. But Renee seemed sincere. She seemed worried about her mother. And I was 64 years old with 2 replaced hips, and the honest truth was that managing Barbara's care on my own was getting harder. So I said yes. They moved into the guest bedroom in September. By November, I felt better about leaving for a few days than I had in years. Renee knew Barbara's schedule, her medications, her preferences. Barbara liked her water at room temperature, hated being rushed in the morning, needed her pills with a small amount of food or her stomach would turn. These weren't complicated instructions. I'd written them all down. I left on a Friday. Now it was Tuesday, and Barbara hadn't had water in at least 2 days, and the pill organizer hadn't been touched since I walked out the door. I want to be precise about what I felt in that moment, because people sometimes assume it was rage. It wasn't. Not yet. What I felt was a cold, crystalline clarity, the kind that only comes when something shifts permanently, and you realize you are never going to see a situation the same way again. I helped Barbara to the bathroom. I brought her more water and 2 crackers from the pantry. I gave her the medications she'd missed, carefully, spaced out so they wouldn't hit her system all at once. I sat with her for an hour and I let her think I was calm. "Where's Renee?" I asked, keeping my voice easy. "She and Victor went somewhere," Barbara said. "Yesterday, I think. The day before? I'm sorry, Nate. I get the days confused." "That's okay," I said. "Don't apologize." I did not call Renee. I did not call Victor. I sat at the kitchen's table after Barbara fell back asleep, and I looked at the full pill organizer for a long time, and I made a decision. I had no idea yet how bad things actually were. The first thing I did was call Barbara's doctor, her neurologist, Dr. O.C., who had been treating her for 6 years, and who I trusted completely. I explained what I'd found when I came home. He told me to bring her in that afternoon. She was dehydrated. Her blood pressure was elevated. She had not, based on the medication still in the organizer, taken her anti-spasticity medication in 4 days, which Dr. O.C. explained was both dangerous and painful. The muscle cramping that comes with withdrawal from that particular medication is severe. He looked at me over Barbara's head while she was resting on the exam table, and he said very quietly, "This is neglect, Nathan." I had known that. Hearing it said out loud by a doctor was different. I asked him to document everything he already had. In the parking lot afterward, I sat in my car for a while. Then I called my brother-in-law, Ted, Barbara's younger brother, and I told him what was happening. Ted is a retired police detective. He didn't say much. He listened, and when I was done, he said, "Don't confront them yet. You need more than this," I said. "I have a doctor's report," he said. "You have 4 days of missed medication. A good lawyer will argue she refused them. You need to establish a pattern, and you need to understand what else they've been doing." I didn't know what he meant by that last part. I found out 2 days later. Barbara's bank statements. I had given Renee access to a secondary account, a household account, separate from our retirement funds and savings, specifically to cover any costs that came up while she and Victor were helping out. Groceries, Barbara's prescriptions, any medical supplies. I'd put $3,000 in it before I left and told Renee to track receipts. The account had $47 in it. I sat at my desk and went through every transaction on the screen, and I felt the cold clarity from before turn into something with more heat in it. Restaurants I didn't recognize, a hotel charge in Scottsdale. They had taken a trip while I was in Phoenix, while Barbara lay in the bedroom without water. Gas stations in 3 different counties. A charge at a jewelry store that made me set down my coffee very carefully. Nearly $3,000 in 4 days. I called the number for my bank's fraud line, then stopped. What I was looking at wasn't fraud, technically. I had given her access to the account. Proving misuse was going to require more than a spreadsheet. Ted came over that evening and we sat at the kitchen table, and I showed him everything. He looked at it the way retired detectives look at things, methodically, without visible emotion. Then he said, "What do you know about their finances?" I said I didn't know much. Victor's business had hit a rough patch the previous year. Renee had mentioned it in passing. Their lease on their apartment had ended, which was part of why the move-in made sense. I had not asked follow-up questions. I had trusted my daughter. Ted said, "I want you to do something for me. Go into your files and check your investment account statements. The paper ones. Check the last 3 months. I don't know why I hadn't thought to do that first. Maybe I hadn't wanted to. I found them in the filing cabinet in the home office, the room that Victor had been using as his workspace while they stayed with us. 3 months of statements. I pulled the most recent one and sat down on the floor right there in the office because I didn't want to carry it to another room. I didn't want to spend that extra 20 seconds not knowing. The account balance was $47,000 lower than it should have been. There had been a change of address on file, a P.O. box I didn't recognize. Statements had been going there for months. Someone had accessed the account online and initiated a series of withdrawals, each just below the threshold that would trigger an automatic fraud alert. Victor worked in commercial real estate. He understood financial structures. He understood thresholds. I called Ted back into the room. He looked at the statement. He took out his phone and called someone, a former colleague, I gathered, and spoke quietly for a few minutes. When he hung up, he said, "This is wire fraud, Nathan. This is federal. I want to tell you that I felt victorious in that moment. I didn't. I sat on the floor of my own office and thought about my daughter, my Renee, who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long car trips, who called me dad and meant it, and I thought about how long this plan had probably been in motion. Whether it had started before they moved in, whether the phone call 3 months ago. I've been thinking, Dad, why don't we move in and help? Whether that call had been Victor's idea all along. Whether my daughter had dialed my number from their apartment, reading from a script, while her husband stood in the doorway and listened. I didn't sleep much that night. I called my own attorney the next morning, a man named Clifford who had handled our estate planning and who I'd known for 15 years. I told him everything. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "How do you want to play this?" I said, "I want to make sure they can't touch anything else first. Then I want them to face consequences for what they've done to Barbara." In that order, we spent the following week doing exactly that. Clifford worked with the bank to freeze and restructure the investment accounts. We documented the household account transactions with a full paper trail. Ted made some calls to a contact at the FBI field office. Wire fraud involving retirement accounts gets federal attention. Dr. O.C. provided a formal written statement about the condition Barbara was in when I brought her in. Renee and Victor came home on a Thursday evening, 8 days after I'd returned from Phoenix. They didn't know I was there. Renee's key still worked the front door. I had not told them I'd discovered the lock change, had said nothing, given them no indication that anything had shifted. Victor came in first, carrying 2 paper bags from a nice restaurant, the kind of takeout that costs $80. He was talking on his phone, laughing at something. He walked past the living room entrance before he registered that I was sitting in the armchair in the dark. He stopped. I turned on the lamp. "Hey, Nathan," he said. His voice did something complicated. Started easy, landed wrong. "We didn't know you were back." "I know," I said. Renee appeared in the doorway behind him. She looked at my face, and then she looked at Victor, and something passed between them very quickly, some silent communication that told me everything I needed to know about who had been running this. "Dad," she said. She smiled, and it almost reached her eyes. "You should have called, we would have—" "Sit down," I said. "Both of you." Victor set the takeout bags on the hall table. They sat on the couch across from me, close together, and I looked at them for a moment before I said anything. "I need to tell you what I found when I came home," I said. "I need you to understand, before anyone says anything else, that I have already spoken to my attorney and to the bank and to Barbara's doctor and to a contact at the FBI. This is not a conversation that can be walked back. It is not a negotiation. I'm telling you what I found because you deserve to hear it from me directly, and then I'm going to tell you what happens next." Victor's jaw did something tight and controlled. Renee's face went very still. I told them about Barbara. I told them about the pill organizer and the dehydration and what Dr. O.C. had written in his report. I watched Renee's face as I talked, and I saw something cross it that looked, for just a moment, like genuine distress. But I had spent 8 days sitting with what I knew, and I couldn't afford to trust what I saw on her face anymore. Then I told them about the investment accounts. Victor said, "I can explain." I said, "The FBI will hear your explanation." Renee started to cry. I looked at her, my daughter, 61 years old, and I had known her face since the day she was born, and I sat very still and I let her cry and I did not move from the armchair. "We were going to pay it back," she said. "Victor's deal in March was going to." "Barbara couldn't walk without help," I said. "She hadn't had water in 2 days. There is no deal in March that addresses that." The 2 officers Ted had arranged came to the door 40 minutes later. Victor stood up too quickly when they knocked his knee against the coffee table, said something under his breath. He was handcuffed in the front hallway, right there under the overhead light, and he looked at me once as they led him out, and I looked back at him, and neither of us said anything. Renee was taken separately. I didn't watch her walk to the car. I looked at the wall. The charges took several months to fully process. Federal cases move at their own pace, and I won't pretend the waiting was easy. Victor faced wire fraud and financial elder abuse charges. Renee was charged with criminal neglect of a vulnerable adult, which carries real consequences in this state. Their attorneys negotiated, as attorneys do, but the documentation was solid, and the FBI doesn't lose much sleep over documented wire transfers. Victor lost his real estate license. He will not practice in this field again. Renee received 2 years of supervised probation and mandatory counseling, along with civil liability for the medical costs and the full amount withdrawn from my accounts. The judge was not gentle in her remarks. "I am not going to tell you what to feel about the probation. Some days I am not sure what I feel about it myself. There is a version of me that wanted the maximum sentence for both of them. There is another version that lay awake some nights and thought about my daughter sitting across from me on that couch, the way she cried, and wondered which parts of her grief were real. What I know is this: Barbara recovered. It took 3 weeks for her to fully stabilize, and she will have some lingering effects from the dehydration and the medication gaps. Dr. OC is monitoring a few things closely, but she is home, and she is safe, and she knows everything, and she is angrier than I have ever seen her. She is furious in the efficient, quiet way that people with real moral clarity tend to be furious. I find it, honestly, one of the more reassuring things I have ever witnessed. I hired a professional home care agency, a licensed, bonded, background-checked agency with supervisory oversight and regular check-ins. I worked with Clifford to establish a clear legal structure around our finances, one that cannot be accessed without multiple layers of verification. The household account is closed. The house has new locks. I installed them myself. What I think about when I think about all of this is not Victor. I understood the moment I saw the investment statements. He was transactional from the start, and I was simply one of the transactions. What I think about is my daughter. Whether there was a moment before all of this when I could have seen what was coming. Whether I missed something. Whether she missed something in herself. Whether a different version of this story exists somewhere in which she picked up the phone that day and called me just because she was worried about her mother. I don't know. I have thought about it from every angle I can reach, and I don't know. What I know is that Barbara is sitting in the garden right now, in the chair by the hydrangeas, and the morning is cool and clear, and I can see her from the kitchen window while I make coffee. She has a full glass of water on the little table beside her. She picked up a book. She has not opened it yet. She's just sitting there with it in her lap, watching something in the yard, a bird maybe, and she looks exactly like herself. That is enough. That has to be enough. And most mornings, looking out that window, it genuinely is.